She just wanted a quiet flight and a window seat. He saw her skin before he saw her humanity. But when the truth came out, the entire cabin fell silent. Aaliyah Monroe had flown countless hours above the clouds. But today, she was simply a passenger, tucked into 2A, a first-class window seat she'd paid for herself, headed home after a grueling week of simulator drills in New York. The Boeing 777 purred with familiar power. The rumble of the auxiliary engine was like a lullaby she'd grown up with. Her pilot's uniform rested neatly in her bag. Today, no gold stripes, just tailored slacks, a silk blouse, and the soft hope of a peaceful journey. She sipped water, pulled out her novel, and exhaled when a shadow blocked the light. A white man, mid-50s, suit creased from arrogance more than wear, glared down at her, clutching his boarding pass like a badge of entitlement. "You're in the wrong seat," he growled. Aaliyah blinked, checked her pass. "I don't believe so. This is 2A. I paid for 2B, he snapped, and I expected a certain environment. This isn't it. His eyes raked over her, not in curiosity, but dismissal. The unspoken line was clear. You don't belong here. But she'd heard that before. Too many times. Aaliyah steadied herself, calmly replied, "Perhaps check your ticket again." The tension reached the flight attendant, Sarah, a seasoned woman with steel beneath her smile. "Is there a problem, sir?" The man hissed, "is in my space, and I won't sit beside her." Her, not the passenger. Not this woman. Her, as if her entire being was an offense. Gasps whispered across the cabin. A few heads turned. Most pretended not to listen. Sarah double-checked the tickets. "Sir, your seat is 2B. Miss Monroe is in 2A. Everything is correct." But the man's voice grew louder. "I'm a platinum member. I demand a change. Put her in coach where she belongs." Aaliyah felt heat rise in her chest, rage cloaked in heartbreak. She had earned that seat. She had earned her wings. And no man, no matter how elite, would reduce her to less. She looked up, calm, cold. "I'm not moving," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unflinching. "This is my seat, and I suggest you take yours." He flinched, for a second, then sneered. "We'll see about that." The man puffed up like a storm cloud, red-faced, arms folded, voice rising with every breath. "Get your supervisor. Now." Sarah didn't blink. "Sir, I am the lead attendant, and I'm asking you to lower your voice." But he wouldn't stop. "Move her, or I'll have your job. Do you know who I am?" Aaliyah closed her eyes. Just for a second. Not from fear, from restraint. She'd seen this dance before. Arrogance on display. Ignorance in a $3,000 suit. He wanted to rattle her, but he had no idea who she was. Passengers exchanged looks. A woman across the aisle shook her head in disgust. A man behind leaned forward, whispering, "What the hell is his problem?" And still he barked. "She doesn't belong in first class. She should be grateful she's even on this flight." Aaliyah opened her book, the words a blur now. Her heart pounded with humiliation, her jaw locked tight. But somewhere beneath it all, her pilot instinct kicked in. "Don't panic. Hold altitude." Another attendant joined. Ben Young, sharp-eyed. "Everything okay, Sarah?" She whispered back, "We got a man refusing to sit next to a black woman." Loud enough for Mr. Peterson to hear. "I'm a paying customer," the man spat, "and I don't want to endure this flight because of her." "Endure?" Aaliyah finally asked, her voice so low it sliced through the noise. "What exactly are you enduring?" He turned to her with a sneer. "People like you should be thankful you're not in the cargo hold." The words hit like a slap across the soul. The cabin fell into stunned silence. The woman across the aisle stood up. "Sir, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." He snarled, "Mind your business." But she didn't flinch. "It is my business when your racism delays my flight." Applause murmured. Support was building. Still he stood. Still he barked. "Bring the captain. I want someone with real authority. Be careful what you wish for." Sarah stepped away, clutching her walkie. Minutes later, the cockpit phone rang. Sarah speaking. "Sarah, came the deep voice of Captain Elias Roman, calm but commanding. "Dispatch flag to seating chain for First Officer Monroe. What's going on?" And just like that, the tide began to shift. Sarah's voice trembled, but she stood tall. "Captain, there's been an incident. A passenger refused to sit next to First Officer Monroe. He made it clear it was racial." Silence on the other end. Then Steele, "Where is she now?" "Seat 4F. She moved voluntarily to avoid escalation." "And the passenger who caused this?" "Still in 2B. "Bring her to the cockpit," he said. "Now. And tell that man I'll be speaking with him myself." Sarah's hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury held too long. She marched down the aisle, stopping beside Aaliyah. "The captain wants to see you." Aaliyah blinked. "The captain? He knows, and he's not happy." She rose slowly, sliding past Mr. Peterson, who smirked as if he'd won a game. He had no idea the storm he'd called was about to land. Behind the cockpit door, the hum of electronics greeted them. Captain Roman stood, tall and commanding, his silver hair a crown of earned authority. He looked at Aaliyah like a father seeing his daughter bruised. "I heard," he said softly. "I'm so sorry. That behavior will not stand on my aircraft." "I didn't want to cause trouble," she said. He shook his head. "You didn't." "He did." He turned to Sarah. "Tell Mr. Peterson I'll be with him shortly. And reassign First Officer Monroe to her original seat with a bottle of the best champagne we have." Sarah grinned. "Gladly, Captain." As she left, Captain Roman picked up the dispatch phone. "Remove Peterson's platinum status immediately and flag him. He's banned for life." Outside the cockpit, the cabin buzzed quietly. People could feel something coming. Sarah approached the smug man in 2B. "Sir, the captain will speak to you now. And we'll need you to move back to your assigned seat. 2B, the window belongs to First Officer Monroe." "What?" he barked. "She's not a—" He froze, because behind Sarah stood Aaliyah, this time in uniform. She stepped forward, calm, poised, deadly quiet. She raised her ID, the gold pilot wings gleaming under cabin lights. "My name," she said, "is Aaliyah Monroe. I'm not just a passenger on this flight." She paused, letting every word land. "I'm your first officer. I'm flying this plane." Gasps spread like wildfire through the cabin. Mr. Peterson's jaw dropped. The color drained from his face. The woman he wanted removed held his life in her hands. The cabin erupted in stunned murmurs. One woman began to clap, slow and proud. Another joined. Then another. A wave of applause swept through first class like a gust of fresh air clearing out rot. Mr. Peterson sat frozen. He looked from Aaliyah to her pilot badge, and then back again, like a man staring at the crash site of his own ego. Captain Roman appeared in the aisle. The room hushed. He stopped at Mr. Peterson's seat, towering like judgment itself. "I'm Captain Roman," he said, voice like stone. "This is my aircraft. And on my aircraft, we don't tolerate hate. Not in the sky, not on the ground, not anywhere." Mr. Peterson stammered. I didn't know that she was a pilot," the captain interrupted. "So racism is acceptable until she outranks you?" The man flinched. "You verbally assaulted my officer. You disrupted this flight. You embarrassed yourself in front of every soul on board." Then came the offer. "You have two options," the captain said, voice razor sharp. "Apologize to First Officer Monroe, return to your seat, and stay silent until we land. Or—" a pause. "Cold. Final. You'll be restrained, arrested, and charged for interfering with flight operations. Make your choice." The man's mouth opened, but no words came. He turned slowly toward Aaliyah, not with sincerity, but survival. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." She looked at him, not with rage now, but something worse. "Pity? Ignorance," she replied, "is a shield. It's a choice." Then, without a word more, she stepped past him and returned to seat 2A. Her seat, her throne. Sarah appeared moments later with a bottle of champagne chilled in a silver bucket. "Compliments to the captain, first officer." Aaliyah smiled, not out of pride, but power reclaimed. The cabin broke into a second round of applause, quieter, deeper. A shared understanding that justice had taken flight. Captain Roman gave one final glare at the silent man in 2B. I suggest you spend the rest of this journey thinking very carefully about how quickly the world just changed around you. Then he walked back to the cockpit. His job done. The rest of the flight passed in something close to reverence. No more outbursts. No more commands barked from 2B. Mr. Peterson had shrunk into a seat. No scotch, no eye contact, no defense. Just silence. Aaliyah sat tall beside the window, the sun casting golden lines across her face as she sipped champagne and flipped pages of book she couldn't quite read. Her mind, still echoing with the weight of what had happened, held both victory and a quiet ache. When the aircraft touched down at Heathrow, the cabin applauded again, this time not for a safe landing, but for justice having flown with them. As passengers began to rise, 2 officers boarded the plane, suited, calm, and unmistakably official. They walked straight to Mr. Peterson. "Sir, we need a word." He didn't argue. He didn't resist. Just nodded, a ghost in a suit, and followed them down the aisle, past the very woman he tried to erase. Their eyes met for a second, and in his, for the first time, something flickered. Not arrogance, not fear, but maybe remorse. It didn't matter. Too late. But that was just the beginning of his downfall. By the time Peterson stepped off that jet bridge, the damage was already done. Unknown to him, a passenger, the same woman who defended Aaliyah mid-flight, had captured the confrontation on her phone. She was a retired journalist, and by the time her post titled "Bigotry at 35,000 feet" hit her blog, the internet had ignited. Within hours, the video went viral. News outlets ran the story. Social media turned Mr. Peterson's name into a national punchline. He became the meme, a man blinded by bigotry, silenced by truth, a relic of the past, dragged into modern airspace and publicly grounded. But karma didn't stop at reputation. He was a senior partner at a global law firm. Emphasis on was. Within 24 hours, clients pulled out. Board meetings were held. His bio vanished from the company's site. A polite leave of absence disguised as permanent dismissal. The very policies on diversity and inclusion he had once smirked at had sealed his fate. Then came the social crash. No more elite invitations. No more whisper respect at cocktail parties. His so-called powerful friends ghosted him like he was contagious. Even his wife filed for divorce, her silence louder than any press release. His own son, a young lawyer trying to build a different kind of legacy, wrote a public letter denouncing his father's actions and apologizing to Aaliyah by name. The final blow? Delivered by blood. Meanwhile, Aaliyah rose. Interviews. Panels. Media headlines calling her the pilot who faced racism at 30,000 feet and never lost altitude. She was offered promotions, speaking gigs, and became the face of Skybridge Air's new diversity campaign. But none of that mattered more than this. Every time she stepped into a cockpit, flipped the switches, and felt the aircraft from under her fingertips, she remembered and smiled. As the engines cooled on the Heathrow tarmac and passengers slowly filed out, Aaliyah remained seated just for a moment. She looked out the window at the misty London morning, her reflection staring back at her faintly in the glass. The same face that man couldn't stand to sit beside was the one that flew him across the Atlantic. Not a word of gratitude, not a whisper of apology that truly meant anything. But she didn't need it, because the applause in that cabin wasn't for landing the plane. It was for rising above. She exited the aircraft to find a small group of staff waiting at the gate. Some offered handshakes, others just respectful nods. A manager stepped forward. "First Officer Monroe, we owe you. That flight, that grace was everything we stand for." She smiled, humbly, quietly, and moved past him into the terminal. Back in the cabin, the last few passengers trickled out, but Mr. Peterson wasn't among them. He sat alone, eyes locked on the seat in front of him, face pale and hollow. The man who had demanded the whole world bend for his comfort was now a statue of disgrace. 2 airport officers waited just beyond the gate. He rose slowly, like a man aging by the minute. And as he walked out, the digital signs above flashed. Welcome to London. But for him, the city wasn't welcoming. Not anymore. Aaliyah moved through the arrivals hall like a wave of calm cutting through chaos. Reporters were already gathering, cameras flashing, but she didn't stop for fame. She didn't fly for applause. She flew for little girls who looked like her, for her father who built model planes he could never afford to ride, for every person who had ever been told, "You don't belong." She walked tall, not because of what had happened, but because of who she'd always been. A pilot, a protector, and now a symbol. Aaliyah stood outside the terminal's glass doors, the London wind brushing her face like a cold reminder that even in victory, pain still lingers. She had endured something that should have never happened. Not in 2025, not in first class, not in her own workplace. But here she was, upright, unshaken. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the airline's internal channel. Official! First Officer Aaliyah Monroe to be recognized in Skybridge's Diversity Spotlight Series. Statement from CEO expected within 48 hours. She put the phone away. It wasn't about press releases. It was about principle. Because no title, no badge, no gold wing should ever be required to earn basic respect. And yet, it still was. Across the world, the video had taken off like wildfire. Clips of Aaliyah calmly showing her ID. The exact moment Captain Roman declared zero tolerance. Passenger reactions. That slow ripple of applause. It wasn't a viral moment. It was a mirror held up to society that too often asks people of color to prove themselves twice as hard, only to be doubted twice as fast. She didn't want to become a symbol, but maybe that's what the world needed right now. A reminder that quiet strength can roar louder than bigotry ever could. Meanwhile, in a quiet village far from the runways and terminals, a different reality was unfolding. Charles Peterson had been a man of habit. Suits pressed, ego polished, calendar full. But now, his home phone never rang. His inbox was empty. Even the mail had stopped bringing invitations. He had become invisible. And the silence? Deafening. His wife had left, citing irreconcilable disgrace. His firm had terminated him with finality masked in legal politeness. His golf club revoked his membership. Even the cafe where he used to order the usual now looked through him like he was made of glass. The man who once demanded space had none left. No podium, no audience, no place, just a recliner chair and a mind haunted by 9 hours at 35,000 feet. He replayed the moment over and over. My name is Aaliyah Monroe. I'm your first officer. Those words hit harder than any courtroom loss he'd ever faced. Because for the first time in his life, he hadn't just been wrong. He had been seen for exactly what he was. But this story wasn't about him. It never was. It was about the girl who grew up sketching airplanes on the backs of grocery receipts. The teenager who sat through aviation exams with boys who called her too delicate for the cockpit. The woman who flew solo before she was 25 and was still asked if she was a flight attendant. Aaliyah had faced turbulence before, but this was a storm broadcast of the world, and she flew through it, not just with composure, but with command. In the days that followed, something beautiful happened. Letters arrived at airline HQ, handwritten notes from little girls in Ghana, from mothers in Atlanta, from retired black pilots who'd waited their whole lives to see someone like her take that kind of stand. One letter stood out. Dear Aaliyah, I'm 11. I want to fly one day. People laugh when I say it, but then I saw your story. Now I'm not afraid to dream. Nia, New Jersey. She read it in her kitchen the night before her next flight. She didn't cry. She smiled, because that's what mattered. Not the man in 2B. Not the fallout. Not even the fame. But the ripple. She had faced a man who tried to ground her and ended up lifting others higher than she ever imagined. 3 weeks later, Aaliyah stepped back into the cockpit of a Skybridge 777. Same switches, same hum, same clouds waiting outside. But something had shifted inside her. This time, she didn't just feel like a pilot. She felt like a pillar, holding space for every quiet, overlooked voice that had ever been told. You don't belong here. The pre-flight checklist buzzed softly beside her. Co-pilot seated to her right. But for a brief second, she paused. She looked out the cockpit window past the tarmac and whispered 2 words under her breath. Never again. Because she had lived the insult. She had swallowed the humiliation. She had even offered grace when she didn't know it. But this time, she hadn't stepped aside. She stepped forward. Mr. Peterson faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale wrapped in regret. His downfall wasn't just karma. It was a world catching up to the truth he tried to deny. That skin color doesn't define capability. That hate has no altitude where it can hide. That even 35,000 feet above, accountability lands hard. And Captain Aaliyah Monroe, didn't need revenge. She had something far better. Every time she pulled that plane into the sky, every time she gripped the throttle, every time she spoke over the intercom and said, "This is your captain speaking," she rewrote the narrative. She showed the world and the next generation that no seat, no cabin, no sky was off-limits. One woman, 1 window seat, 1 badge, and a lifetime of storms that never stopped her from flying. Because some people ride the plane, and some command it,